Broadcasting from the stages of London, this is Musical Talk, the UK's first independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. Joining me on the phone is my favourite composer in the whole world, Mr. Alan Menken. Hello.
Hello, Nick.
How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time out to talk to us today.
My pleasure.
Now, Little Mermaid opened last night at the Fontaine Theatre.
Yes, sir.
How did this go?
Oh, the opening was so exciting. The performance was wonderful. The audience was wonderful, and we had a great kickoff for the show. We're all very, very pleased.
Is it everything you'd hoped it would be?
The show itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with the show. It's not an easy balancing act to create something that is both an adaptation of an animated feature and at the same time gives it new dimension on stage. Expanding the score, trying to live up to the expectations of the people who love the original, and yet also trying to address the needs of a theater audience wanting to see something new as well.
Mm-hmm. So
there's always subjective elements where you try to get inside of people's expectations and see if you can satisfy them. But at the end of the day, really, as an artist, have to satisfy yourself most of all.
Did any lessons you learnt in adapting Beauty and the Beast apply to any techniques you did for Little Mermaid?
I want to support and protect the original score that Howard Ashman and I wrote,
mm-hmm.
first and foremost, and then construct the rest of the score to be supportive to that and also fill in those other moments that are implied in the original score but we never had a chance to write. And hopefully in that process you get a couple of songs that will rise to the level of the other songs, which I think of as sort of the main tent poles, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Beauty and the Beast, I know that Tim and I wrote a new song at the end of Act 1, If I Can't Love Her, and also we had a song that Howard and I had written for the movie called Human Again that never got in, and those were, I think, the two biggest new contributions. Howard and I wrote that for the animated feature.
Yes.
It was replaced by the song Something There, and because Human Again was a very large, ambitious number. It spanned a long period of time and showed Belle and the Beast becoming closer and closer, and at the same time the objects looking forward to no longer being household objects and having the spell broken and becoming human.
And then, of course, with the magic of DVD, you were able to put this song back in the film almost seamlessly.
It was great. We got to have it and record it fully after Howard passed away, and that was a pretty dazzling experience.
Yes, it's a wonderful song. I enjoy it very much.
And the same kind of thing we got to do on Aladdin when we recorded a fully orchestral version of Proud of Your Boy with Clay Aiken. It was so emotional to be able to go back to something Howard and I had written and then kind of breathe life into it after 15 years after the fact.
Was Howard looking over your shoulder during the adaptation of Little Mermaid?
I think so. I feel that. And
it shows in the production, you think?
Yeah. I feel his influence, and I feel his... it certainly gave me, strength and courage. And it was interesting, the last show Howard did on Broadway was called Smile. He actually wrote it with Marvin Hamlish, and that was at the Lunt-Fontanne.
Yes, and that's his...
But Lunt-Fontanne has kind of become our go-to theater now.
They should rename it the Howard Ashman Theatre after his... Now, I've always associated musical theatre with theme parks, with the way the interaction with, cast members and all these things like that. Your music is heard at the Disney parks worldwide. You've just composed music for a revamped attraction at Disney Sea in Tokyo called Sinbad's Storybook Voyage.
Right.
How do you go about working with Imagineers on these kind of projects, and how does it differ from a theatrical score?
Well, Sinbad is a whole different animal, because Sinbad was a ride. So that was a whole other discipline. I mean, there you're dealing with these 20 rooms, that this boat glides through. It's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean or one of those kinds of rides where you go through different
scenes.
And in each room, the song supposedly continues, except the song, each room is on a loop.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to be able to create a loop where it's going to be heard by the room before it and the room after it. So it's pretty complicated to structure something that will work for a ride. Basically, you want to catch the thematic material, have something that's general enough so that it can work for the entire ride, but also enough little specifics in each room so that it tells the story.
And apparently they're planning a ride on the Little Mermaid now.
Yeah, I think so. I don't have no relation to that at the moment.
Which sounds very exciting.
I'm sure they'll use my songs. And we were also working on a Snow Queen project for Tokyo Disney Seas.
Yes.
Which didn't happen, I think, for budgetary reasons. But that was going to be a real new theatrical creation. At California Adventure, we wrote an Aladdin musical, which also was directed by Francesca Zambello. I think it was about 40 minutes long.
Who's directed Little Mermaid, now on Broadway.
But, when you talk about Broadway, it really is not really akin to the park experience.
That's what I think Disney have done so well, is they're able to give people who wouldn't normally go to Broadway, when they go to California Adventure, they can see a Broadway-style show included in their ticket price, which is wonderful.
Of the park. And then when they come to Broadway, there is a special niche
yes.
Of people who are going to be really satisfied by the kind of experience that they'll get from Beauty and the Beast or The Lion King or
Mary Poppins or whatever.
Or Little Mermaid. And there are those people, and many of whom are the critics, for whom that show is simply not created for them. They just don't get it.
But I think shows like Wicked have proved that critics aren't really necessary anymore.
Yeah, they're not, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was actually this morning trying to think about any time in my career where the critics have actually made a contribution that has actually had an impact on the run of a show, either positive or negative. And the truth is, I just can't think of it. I think in few cases have I ever been, the quote-unquote the critic's darling. And in the cases where I was, it was kind of just the cherry on top. It didn't really make that much of a difference.
Well, the famous quote is, the best show on Broadway is not on Broadway.
Beauty and the Beast. That was Frank Rich. Listen, I have respect for many of the critics, and they're entitled to their opinion, and I'm interested in their opinion, actually. But often, you just look at it and you go, oh, they're not really looking from the very beginning of they're not looking for the experience that we're creating. So
No.
Kind of, why would you come to review a French restaurant if you're looking for a Thai food? It's almost that kind of a disconnect. And yes, shows like Wicked and shows like Beauty and the Beast, most of the Andrew Lloyd Webber shows and most of the Disney shows have a bit of a strange disconnect with the critics, but they have a huge connect generally with an audience. And I think Little Mermaid is very much that kind of a show. There's a quality, number one, to the original material that makes people want to come and see it, and then the adaptation doesn't violate that. I think it adds to it to such a great degree that audiences who love the original love this.
There's a kind of mystery about it, going to see what's been done beyond what people know off by heart, in a way.
Right, and you get a lot of people second-guessing what you do, and that's just par for the course. You're going to have to live with that.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about Lehman Engel?
Lehman Engel was a great teacher who he was first a musician, a composer, musical director, and conductor on Broadway. And he was kind of a legend in his time. If you look at many of the cast albums from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you'll see Lehman Engel's name as one of the great conductors, musical directors. Starting in the early 60s, Lehman began a workshop at BMI. When BMI is one of the royalty collection agencies, like ASCAP and BMI. And the purpose of the workshop was to teach composers who are not familiar with musical theater the craft of adapting their song or their talent as a composer to telling a story. And Lehman really developed his theories of how that is done through his years of observing shows from the pit as a conductor. And I think he wrote maybe what is the definitive text on how you create a musical. It's a book called Words with Music. Hard to find, by the way.
I own a copy.
You do?
I do, yes. I'll sell it to you if you want.
I have one, but I don't think it's in print now. You have to get it like through eBay or something.
Mm-hmm.
And Lehman taught this workshop at BMI, and writers would come in and have assignments in the first year, and each would write the same assignments and comment on each other's work. And then by the third year, you were working on your own musicals. But the workshop became very much a soundboard for your work and a place where you got critiqued. You certainly learned how to take criticism.
What did he teach you?
Oh, my God. You learn about, they're all very obvious things.
Mm-hmm.
How you have a protagonist who has some sort of a big dream that he or she is, has always held dear to the heart. So you have certainly the type of protagonist, the type of want that your character has, the type of obstacle, and then from there, where the songs are most effective, how, where you want to leave off an audience at the end of the first act. these are things that they are taught to you, but then, as you write musicals, it becomes intuitive to you as an artist, because you just know it's all about holding an audience's attention and communicating with an audience and keeping them emotionally engaged. And those things are fairly obvious. When you tell somebody, it's really important that at the top of a musical, very close to the top, there has to be a song sung to let people know that things are going to be sung this evening, get them comfortable with that. And it's important that in that song you establish tone, the style, the way the score is going to work, and so you let an audience in on the experience. To me, that seems totally obvious. How else would you do it? It's like saying there needs to be a front door to a house.
Well, it seems obvious to us nowadays, but maybe back when the craft of musicals wasn't so much well known, it probably wasn't obvious.
Yes.
Now, you've written a musical called Honeymooners.
Oh my God, that goes way back, yes.
But it wasn't produced due to rights issues. How, as a writer, does one cope with this difficult problem of rights, and that affects so many of us, do you think?
Well, when I was writing Honeymooners, I was young, and actually there was a producer who supposedly had the rights. I think I found out later that those rights were not secured sufficiently, and so we never got the rights through him. Later on, at a time in my career where I had a lot more clout and a lot more weight, I actually went after the rights and tried to get them. They were making that movie of the Honeymooners, black version of Honeymooners, could not get the rights. Now I might be able to. And that was, of course, that was my music and lyrics, so it's a very early time in my career when I was doing both. I would love to see that show happen someday. It's a matter of time. And
maybe I've triggered something in your brain to maybe seek out the rights for the third time lucky.
Well, yeah, but not too soon, because I have an extremely full plate of other projects coming along that I have to fight my way through first.
Well, I have to say, your Christmas Carol is one of the best versions out there, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Of a much adapted story. Now, how hard is it to adapt a musical that's been done so many times?
I wasn't, because I made it a point not to study the other versions. I just really approached it as a new assignment, along with Lynn Ahrens and Mike Cochran.
It had a very dark and operatic tone to it, which is what makes it stand out for me. The fact that it starts with some terrifying music just makes it wonderful, because the book starts in a very dark tone.
Yes, I mean, it's not structured in a traditional way. The structure really is about the ghosts as they come and the lesson that Scrooge learns, and just, basically to tell the story and catch the wonderful atmosphere of Dickens. And we had, of course, the assignment of doing this for a 6,000-seat theater in a 90-minute show, but a second over 90 minutes. Big financial liability for the theater. So it took a lot of discipline to write that. I loved when that show was running. It was just fantastic to go each year and have that slice of Christmas down, London Christmas.
Will it ever come to London, do you think?
There were plans to bring it to London, and I wonder if there have been productions. I know there's each holiday season there's quite a few productions. I'm curious if there may have been some, certainly in England. I would love if it came to London.
We usually have the Leslie Brickus version in London, which is very good, but I still prefer your version.
Thank you. I knew the Brickus version only in passing. I don't know if I've ever actually watched the entire thing. I know that our version really moves along in a very smart way, in a very economical way, and it also, I think, has a real emotional punch at the end.
Yes.
I'm very, very pleased with it. I've always wanted to do another project with Lynn Ahrens, and of course, if only Mike Cochran was still around, our business would be a much better business in general, because he was a wonderful guy.
Well, I'd love to see the production one day, and I hope it does tread the boards in the West End, as they say.
Yeah.
We recently had Mark Shaman on the show. What was your reaction to the parody of your music within South Park, Bigger, Longer and Uncut?
I was totally flattered. Mark is really clever and really talented, and, how can you not be flattered?
They say imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery, and I do believe that.
Absolutely.
Is there something true in me thinking that in Beauty and the Beast, are going to get quite analytical here as regards music? The fact that the word me ends 3 of the songs, and in If I Can't Love Her, the me is a top high F, and in me, the me at the end is a top high F. Does that symbolise the fact that Gaston and the Beast are really the same characters in a way, then they sort of switch roles?
Oh my God. You are so far ahead of me on that one. I wasn't even... No, I think it has to do with the fact that Tim Rice maybe is obsessed with me, the word me. No.
Okay, moving on.
Boy, certainly in terms of Gaston, it's reflective of the fact that he's a completely narcissistic character.
Yes.
What's the third song that ends with me?
A Change in Me, I believe.
Oh. Both Belle, the Beast, and Gaston are the same character.
Well...
that would be an interesting...
Yes. I wouldn't go that far. That's more for the sequel, I think, which has been done already. In Michael Bolton's version of Go the Distance, there's a bridge section that is not in the movie version of the song. What's the process of converting a musical theatre song into a pop song, or vice versa?
You just try to go to those logical... You try to create music that's a logical extension of what you wrote that will help it exist in the marketplace. If you listen to an Enchanted, the version of the song that's in the movie is not the same as the single by Carrie Underwood. It also expands. It opens up a bit. Stephen Schwartz in Prince of Egypt had the song "When You Believe," and single version was one which he had Babyface producing, and then Babyface ended up getting a writing credit for I guess some of his arranging on the song, which became a real point of contention, of course, at the Oscars. In general, songs do open up structurally.
Stephen Schwartz said he loves it when people do Go the Distance at auditions because it's such a wonderful song, and I couldn't agree with him more.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great.
The song I'm Wishing by Frank Churchill from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs opens with a 5-note motif that is similar to the one used by Gazelle in Enchanted. Is this a deliberate nod to Snow White?
Oh, my God, Nick, wait a second. You mean I'm wishing?
But musically it starts da-da-da-da-da.
Oh, that. Well, it's an homage.
Yeah.
No question. It's a total deliberate homage.
And I have to say, Enchanted is a wonderful, wonderful movie. I was actually in the cinema with you when you were over in London in October.
By the way, Nick, that was the first time I saw Enchanted.
Oh, really?
Yep, that night. I was a blubbering mess. I was very emotional.
So was I. I really, really enjoyed the movie, and I saw it a second time a couple of weeks ago, and I was able to probably enjoy it more because since then I got the soundtrack, and I listened to the lyrics, and I knew them off by heart by then. And little things I never noticed, like the counterpoint you used in How Does She Know?
Oh, yeah, well, actually, there's really a 3-part counterpoint there, not a 2-part. There's a 3-part counterpoint. We really didn't use it that much in the film, but if you take the thematic material from the verse of How Do You Know, there's 3 parts that exist as a 3-part counterpoint.
Counterpoint really interests me, and I'm very impressed with your counterpoint in Carrying the Banner. That must have taken ages to work out.
Oh, no, that was just a lot of fun. Carrying the Banner, Newsies never really lived up to our expectations or our hopes, and most of our ambition really sat in that song and Santa Fe and King of New York, and actually we're sitting down to talk about a theatrical adaptation of Newsies in February.
Finally.
Another new project that
But it's gained a huge fan base, especially with females for some reason. I can't work out why. Maybe it's the fact it has 200 teenage boys dancing in it.
Well, I think it's both boys and girls. I mean, certainly older boys may not be that into it, but a lot of the younger actors I work with are just saying, "Please do Newsies." There's a lot of passion for that show. It's just a matter of figuring out how to really give it a real theatrical legitimacy. They came to me at the studio, and they're interested in doing this musical. Jeffrey Katzenberg used to blame me for the fact that they went forward into production because where the movie, I think, was a nice movie, they weren't prepared necessarily to go forward. And when they heard the songs, especially at a time where we were very, very influential at Disney with Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin, I think the songs pushed them over the top into creating this musical. And then, as they got deeper and deeper into it and had to consider what all the budgets were going to be, and Jeffrey would tease me and say, "Your fault, you got us into this."
Well, it still holds up to be a cult classic among many, many musical theatre fans.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you 8 quick questions, and you'll have to give your answers very quickly. Is that all right?
I hope I can do it.
Question 1, your favourite score?
Aladdin.
Question 2, your favourite non-musical theatre composer?
Brahms.
Favourite musical theatre composer?
Frank Lesser.
What would you say to Walt if you were to meet with him today?
I would say thank you for this great tradition that I'm getting to be a part of.
And what would you hope Walt would say to you?
I hope he would say thank you for helping keep it alive.
What profession would you not like to do?
Dentistry.
What is your favourite word?
Emotion.
And finally, what's the one musical song that you didn't write that you wish you had?
New Words by Maury Yeston.
Crimson Crow from the forums has asked, what do you think of the current state of musical theatre?
I think musical theatre is actually very healthy right now. There's a wide variety of musicals that are running and are being embraced by audiences. I think we're in the era of the comedic musical. The more emotional musicals are a little bit not in vogue at the moment, or the spectacle musicals are not really as much in vogue. But I think we're in an atmosphere where all of them are able to survive if they're written well and if you communicate well with an audience.
Well, they say that the musical comedy made a comeback after 9/11. It was much needed. Do you think that's true?
Comedy has always been a huge element in musicals. Howard Ashman used to say that the form that was actually closest to musical comedy is the sitcom in terms of economy and the needs to keep the laughs coming at a regular film.
Quickly, what was it like working with Howard?
It was very intense working with Howard, and it was thrilling working with Howard.
Would he crack jokes all the time? Because I get the impression from his lyrics that he was an incredibly humorous person.
He was very funny, very impatient, he was very exacting, and very passionate.
That's all you want in a collaborator, isn't it? Sophie says, what point in your career did you realise, oh my God, I'm amazing? Or when was the first time someone told you that you had potential?
I mean, that kind of thing, unfortunately, comes usually at a point where it's not true, but you're feeling your oats. I would say after a couple of years in the BMI workshop, I began to realize that I had a unique gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to get attention and approval, and then I guess at some point I must have said, oh my God, I'm amazing.
Those words exactly, yes. Since you're so brilliant at using so many musical musical styles in your scores, like country and western in Home on the Range, Arabian style in Aladdin, gospel in Hercules, medieval gothic in Hunchback, is there a style of music that you have yet to conquer or would see as a future challenge? That's from Irving.
Sister Act is opening in London, actually, next fall, and that's a disco-style musical. Leap of Faith is gospel, and that's going to be opening on Broadway in the 2008-2009 season. Opera is a form that I haven't yet really dealt with seriously that I'm thinking about.
What about King David?
King David is sort of an oratorio, and if it was operatic, I consider it unsuccessfully operatic. I think I could do a much better job, but I really wasn't aiming for anything operatic there. I was aiming really for something that was more a big song cycle with some song recitative.
Wisdom asks, can you describe your experience at NYU?
All I can say is I started school in 1967, which was the summer of love, and I was a bit of a hippie, actually a lot of a hippie. So the academic part of my relationship to NYU was pretty unsuccessful, but I was very active. I wrote musicals and thoroughly enjoyed my 4 years of college. Thank God I was able to stick it out and not get thrown out of school. But I was hardly the model student, although that's something they've forgotten about since. And now I have a Distinguished Alumni Award, a doctorate, and a scholarship in my name.
Well, there you go. Proves that you don't need to really do much at university, but
unfortunately,
listeners, please don't take that advice. He also asked, what would be your second choice as a career?
A chef. I am actually not a good cook, but I would love. I love eating, or maybe a wine taster.
Yes. Marika asks, what did you think of the Menia Chocolate Factory production of the revival of Little Shop of Horrors?
I thought it was really exciting, and there were things about it that I actually didn't understand very well. There were sort of certain Americanisms, if you will, that didn't translate as I expected to the English stage, to this interpretation of the show. And there were certain things that were done that were so more akin to English culture than to American.
Can you give any examples?
Just some of the choreography, some of the acting choices were for me, not something that I really understood, and yet the English audience really enjoyed it. So I can't pretend to totally understand why it worked. It absolutely worked totally for an English audience. I'm not sure that production would have worked for an American audience.
That's interesting. I think we can all agree that Sheridan Smith was fantastic as Audrey.
Oh my God, she was great. And the plant, I mean, when I went by the Menia Chocolate Factory, it reminded me of the days back at WPA when we were first doing the show. That feeling of young artists creating something almost from scratch. They really did make it their own. And more than anything else, that's what I want people to do. So whether I totally understand what somebody does with my work or not, I prefer they make it their own than that they slavishly duplicate something that I did.
I heard that Howard Ashman's partner was there. What did he think of it?
I think he liked it very much.
How can you not? I mean, I have to thank you. That musical got at me, A, into musical theatre, and B, into rock and roll at the tender age of 5 or something.
Oh, well, great, thank you.
And it's annoyed my parents with it, I think, forever on.
My pleasure to annoy your parents.
RB Canadian 181 asks, how do you approach writing a song? And he asked this because your music is what inspired him to teach himself piano and to pursue music.
As somebody who writes primarily for musical theatre or for for projects that have a dramatic underpinning, my process is always to figure out what story point needs to be told in this song, what is the best style this song could be told through, who's singing the song, where does the song start emotionally, where does it end emotionally or plot-wise, and I always need to put all those specifics on the table in front of me. I'll even say, what song might this remind me of? What wink do I want to make to a shared experience with the listener? All of those elements have to be on the table before I can write a successful song.
Now, in Enchanted, the music is described here by lights, places, action as old Disney. How did you prepare for that?
I listened to old Disney. I listened to Snow White and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Pinocchio, and really tried to capture the essence of those hyper-innocent characters. Hyper-romantic, hyper-innocent.
The question I have is, how much input do you have into the orchestrations that go into your work?
Well, I have a huge amount of input into all the voicings, all of the dynamics, all the structural elements. Every bit of actual notes comes from me, for the most part. In terms of the orchestral coloration, I have long-term relationships with a number of orchestrators, primarily Danny True, but also Michael Starobin, Doug Besterman, and I trust that, once I create my original demo, I trust them to interpret it and find the most clever way to communicate the style of a song to an audience.
What technology do you use to write music, or are you a traditional pen and paper man?
I now work through MIDI almost entirely. I have a MIDI studio, MIDI keyboard, and I work through a program called Digital Performer. Yeah, I write basically in a very hands-on playing approach as opposed to pen to paper.
Amy Vocalist says her favourite song is Somewhere That's Green. It's a perfect longing song and captures Audrey's want for a better life perfectly. Musically, what makes a perfect I Want song?
The perfect I Want song is the moment when a character reveals to us a deep longing, an agenda, something that this character needs to have in a very impassioned way, and something where in the story we can also create an obstacle in the way of it. And that's how you fuel the dramatic tension in a musical.
But musically, what goes into the song on your behalf? I mean, what chord patterns or specific chords, or what, whether do you change key halfway through? What do you sort of...
There's no formula for that, honestly. Certainly you need to create music that will bring out the essence of the emotion of the character. More often than not, an I Want song is going to be major key and positive in nature. It's going to be hopeful in the face of dire odds. So therefore, you are talking about something that's usually major key. It starts in a gentle, introspective place, and often moves to an impassioned crescendo where this character really lets out the true intensity of their desire, and then often comes back to a much more private place at the end. But these are vast generalities. There's no formula, really.
And on to some of the presenters' questions. One of our presenters, Lisa, asks, what's your view on the way reality TV is helping Broadway and West End sales?
I think it lets people in on the process, lets people feel an investment not only in the story and in the production, but also in the actors and in what they go through, in the casting process, in the thought process of the creative team. That can only help an audience when they come in to have a greater appreciation. The musical that really opened things up the most, I think, was the chorus line. Just ripped away the wall between musical theater and the audience and let the audience right into the heart of the actor's experience.
I always wish you had a sort of modern backstage musical focusing on all the technical aspects of the running of a musical. I think it'd be very interesting.
Yeah.
A duet between the two stage managers or something.
Oh, yeah. Well, that would be interesting. It would be interesting. I mean, it's a matter of the story and how much you can have the story of onstage and backstage happening at the same time.
Well, of course, Kiss Me Kate did that very well.
Sure, but and Michael Bennett's shows did that very well. Not only Chorus Line, really, Dreamgirls did that as well. Took you backstage and onstage, and there are moments of Sister Act, quite a few that do the same kinds of thing.
I'm so thrilled that Sister Act is to be opening here in London.
Thrilled too.
What were the productions like in California and
Atlanta? I think they were good, but I felt we had more work to do as writers, and I think we had more rethinking to do as far as, the look and tone of the show. And so we went back to the drawing board after Atlanta, and we're in the midst of completely revamping the show. 2/3 of the score remains, although it's be rewritten, and another third is going to be written from scratch entirely.
Tim says a lot of your musicals in the past seem to be set in the past, and on the whole deal with generally wholesome topics apart from human-eating plants. Do you think in the future you'd like to tackle the musical dealing with more contemporary issues, perhaps with a hip-hop score?
Probably not me. In general, musicals best communicate with a score that has had time to marinate in our culture and move into a place where a lot of cultural meaning has been able to attach itself to that style of music, because that really helps inform an audience about what the experience is. Musicals that are entirely fueled by a new style of music, a contemporary style, inevitably simply become about that style and nothing else. So my feeling is, a hip-hop score could happen in, maybe 10, 15 years, a rap score. I don't know that I'd be the one to write it, though. I tend to be a melodist.
You sort of have rap in Little Shop of Horrors, though, don't you, when the plant...
Oh, it's true, an early rap, well, it was Mean Green Mother from Outer Space.
Yeah.
Howard was ahead of his time.
Yes, he was in the hood, probably.
Yeah, that style also, you could hear songs like that in the 50s, with a rhythmic percussion and kind of a cool spoken line.
Well, doo-wop probably is the best example of that, but I wouldn't say doo-wop has links to hip-hop. They sound the same. Our presenter Dom, his favourite song in the whole world is If I Can't Love Her, which is also one of my favourite songs. With so many memorable songs from the stage show, how did you decide on writing a lament for the Beast at the end of Act 1?
The moment that needed to end the act was the moment where the Beast has sealed his fate. The spell is not going to be broken. He's driven her away. His soul has kind of split open, and he sort of howls to the heavens that if I can't love her, then
who?
Then who? Then what will happen to me? What will happen to me? And so it seemed the place where we would best set up the tension for Act 2. We had not heard the Beast really sing from his soul before, and clearly when that was going to happen had to be an extremely pivotal moment in the score. I always thought about that moment from South Pacific, that's the song This Nearly Was Mine, which had such an elegance and a centered sadness to it when it's sung by Emile. And I just love that the stateliness of it.
That's what Hammerstein was so great at, was structuring musicals. I saw our production of The Sound of Music a couple of weeks ago, and I've seen it a couple of times, and I'm always so impressed at how they're able to bring back songs in the second act, and they have a completely different meaning.
Right.
It just proves to me, okay, well, the real stars of musical theatre are the writers.
The real stars of a musical are the songs.
Yeah, and Andy asks, overall, who is your biggest inspiration?
I have to give a group answer. My biggest inspiration are my contemporaries in the theatre, my friends and associates, my collaborators. They're the people who keep me going and keep me feeling centered. Howard Ashman. I suppose the memory of Howard is probably my biggest inspiration.
Now, when you sit down to write a score, I'm always I'm always impressed by your use of leitmotifs. Do you write those first and then do the songs, or do you fit them in the songs, or do they all come at the same time?
No, I usually try to create the song moment and then find the leitmotifs within it that I'm going to use elsewhere in the score. But the completed song usually then speaks to me and reveals to me what are the moments that will thread their way through the rest of the story.
Because I love the moment at the end of If I Can't Love Her, where you quote the opening da-da-da,
right.
Which, interestingly, only happens on the London cast recording, I've heard. It doesn't happen on the Broadway. Why is that?
I'd forgotten about that. And if that is the case, it probably was because sometimes, in the course of the first year of Beauty and the Beast on Broadway, we looked for another way to end the song, and then were able to, bring that improvement to the London production. I actually was not even aware that we didn't have that on the Broadway cast recording. I haven't listened to it in about a decade, so...
I have to thank you hugely, Alan, for talking to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure, Nick.
I hope Little Mermaid continues to thrive, and we look forward to all the musicals opening on Broadway and in the West End of yours.
Thank you.
And I hope you can keep us posted.
And thank you for having me on your show.
So there you have the interview with Alan Menken. Thank you very much to all our wonderful listeners who submitted wonderful questions. Now, we all know Alan Menken is a wonderful songwriter, but his daughter, Anna Menken, is also a wonderful songwriter. So we're going to close the show with one of her songs. This is called Overtone. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, it's feedback@musicaltalk.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Picture your life. Picture it now. Is it what you imagined? Is it all you thought it would be? We're all grown in stone houses, pick up sticks together. All we need to see is the spark. Then we're out of the dark. Open your eyes, see it for what it is, because you just see the image, but the brilliant colors stir within the skies. As in your eyes, the skies. As in your eyes. So little gunslinger, tell me what's on your back. What are you fighting for? When are you gonna attack? How did it come to this? It all started with one little spark, and now the flames are massive. Can't we go back to the start? Picture your life. Picture it now. In cinematic black. In a dark shaded room. Build up your stone houses. Raise your children in the dark. Watch them rub those sticks together. Watch them see the spark. We're out of the dark. We're out of the dark.
This has been a production of Musical Talk, copyright 2008.